Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Lance Robinson. Oh, beautiful. Oh, this is great. Okay, so it's so I have to describe the photo. So if somebody who's listening, they go, okay, what is this all about? So it's a beautiful sunset. There's at the bottom, almost half of the image looks like grasses. It could be a wheat field, but it's kind of odd, very faintly greenish. It's a very it's a landscape shot, so very kind of the format is a long rectangle. The horizon is perfectly straight. There's like distant trees, forests in silhouette, and the sky is this dramatic sunset with this beautiful cloud and the sun orange and golden with reds and just glorious sunset. I think it's a sunset. Is it a sunrise? Sunset? I think it's a sunset. I put my money on a sunset. So
yeah, I think it's a sunset. Yeah.
So what's this?
This is a kind of landscape you're likely to see in a lot of parts of southern Saskatchewan or many places across the Canadian prairies. This flat land. In this case, you've got some trees on the horizon, probably like a shelter break that the farmer has planted. But I included this because I think that prairie landscape just influenced me so much. I grew up in the city, but our house was at the edge of the city, and I could step out from my house onto the street. I could look to the west, and I could see, like, beyond the edge of our block, that was the edge of the city, the end of our block. And then I could see like 5-6 kilometers or more off to the horizon. Just flat land. The sky is big and bold, and clouds like that, like we see in this picture, just have a life of their own. I think that landscape just sort of wove its way into my soul, and yeah, I mean, it had influences, I think, in a subtle way on where I went eventually with career and other kinds of stuff.
So I grew up in Montreal, so fellow Canadian.
Yeah.
I think a few episodes or weeks ago, I had another guest who was also, I mean, wasn't living in the prairies, but I think Saskatchewan, and then also influenced by that landscape. Weaving into that, I was listening to a podcast about the Everglades, right? And the Everglades are just a massive sea of swamp, right? But also low grass, lowlands, right? Flat. Okay, so why don't you convey to somebody from Southeast Asia or from the Middle East or somebody who has no frame of reference, right? Like essentially it's a flat, straight land, but with big skies. So maybe somebody from the desert, a desert plateau or something might be able to connect with that idea, right? So yeah. As you mentioned writing earlier, as somebody who puts ideas into words, why don't you riff a little bit about how the landscape shaped you? Because it's one thing to say that, the landscape really impacted on how I see the world and all this stuff, but why don't you make that real for somebody? Like, how does that manifest?
I've been to some of the places that people think of as some of the most beautiful places in Canada. Think of the Rocky Mountains, the west coast of British Columbia, and those are beautiful places. But I often feel, as much as I enjoy the beauty in those places, I often feel just a tiny bit claustrophobic. Being in the mountains in Western Alberta or in British Columbia, and in some places you can be a place where the sun rises at 10 a.m. and sets at 4 p.m. just because you're down at the bottom of this steep valley.
Right.
And I feel better when I can see in miles and miles in every direction. And it's, I don't know if this is honest or not, but I feel like the sky has this sense of possibility.
Okay.
And I think that sense of possibility sort of wove its way into to how I see the world, and just applying that in different areas. My life, the future of ourselves as a species. I mean, you name it. That there is a wealth of possibilities out there. Our future as human beings is this wide open skyscape that we could take in whatever direction we wanted to, if we really wanted to. That freedom there, I think, is sort of brought itself into how I see the world.
Interesting. Okay, so one side of so on the one hand, you mentioned claustrophobia, right? So yes, so there is something about, and I've been to BC. I love BC. It's this dramatic. It's a high drama. Everything's really big. So on the one hand, there is that sense of claustrophobia. Yeah, I get it. But the other side of claustrophobia is agoraphobia, right? The fear of wide open spaces, which to you is no. That's not a fear, right? So have you been out in the high, crazy open ocean, like so far away from land that there's only water and sky?
Yes, I mean not much, but yeah, briefly, and yeah, it's a similar feeling. I don't feel quite as comfortable because it's not solid ground under my
Right.
feet, but the vista, the expanse, yeah, it feels very similar.
So okay, so
Um,
let me interrupt. I do that all the time, by the way. I interrupt my guests. I'm a total shit host.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so like, because we're getting to know you. Okay, so I put it out there that because you mentioned writing, and so like before we started recording, like I come from the world of writing as well, right? So I my first degree was in creative writing, and there's something about studying creative writing in Canada that really there's a pillar or a value in Canadian writing that is really anchored to the landscape, right? To the land mass, the Canada is a just massive place, with quite a range in geography. And so what's your link to either the historical writers, the Canadian historical writers, or how did you fall into writing? Like, what I'm trying to do is trying to get you to paint a sort of sense of why writing and expression for you is so anchored to wide open spaces.
Wow, that's an interesting one. I don't. I mean, maybe it's that that wide open landscape, that sense of possibilities. Also, one way to think about that freedom and that open space is imagination. And I've always been attracted to the most imaginative, not necessarily naturalistic forms of literature. So, science fiction and fantasy particularly. Having that sense of awe and wonder, and I think you get that whether it's watching a thunderstorm approach and watching it approach for like 30 minutes because you can see it 10, 15 kilometers away, or is looking at the night sky at night. That that sense of awe is there. And when I encountered that in writing, and very different kind of writing, but science fiction, not necessarily science fiction about prairie landscapes, which I don't think there's a whole lot of that, but that the sense of awe was what I think I intuitively recognized, and I wanted to create that myself.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming we're gonna dive into your books or so. Okay, so how long have you been writing? Like, how long have you been expressing yourself in writing? Are you? I mean, I don't know anything about you. Or maybe you're a journalist by trade. I don't like.
Sure. So no, I write science fiction primarily, and I've been writing in one form or another since I was a kid. I can think of particular teachers in grade school who encouraged me, complimented my writing, or told me to do more. One teacher who told us about a contest that CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, was running. They had a kids show, and kids could submit stories. And the show was called Pencil Box. And Pencil Box would would select stories that kids submitted and would dramatize
Oh,
them. One of our teachers told us about this contest, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try that. And they picked a story. That I
oh,
sent in.
wow.
So I had a story on CBC
Respect.
on after school kids show. But I think I got more serious about it in high school. I had one particular English teacher who exposed us to some interesting literature and stuff that wasn't like core curriculum kind of stuff. We read Dune in high school.
Oh, nice.
So, I'm reading things like that, then that really, that sealed the deal for me that, okay, science fiction, this is what I love. This is what I want to do.
Nice. Okay. Well, because we're doing what I love, which is meeting people and talking about art and expression and thought, let's move on to the next photo. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.